Cam from Fight Octave here, and today I'm here again with Lucas Rosa after a huge victory versus Aaron Hughes. What's going on?
What's up, man? How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you for joining the show.
Of course, I always love to be on here, and it was cool having you there at Fight Night too. It was a special night, so yeah.
Of course, we're going to be having a documentary coming out in a few days here, guys, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But let's talk about the fight. You came in,
Yeah,
victory in the first round again with a north-south choke, super rare. How did that victory feel?
I mean, yeah, there was some about this one that just like felt, I don't know, like different than a lot of. I mean, my other pro wins definitely felt good, like in a way of like, anytime you make it to that level of like being a pro athlete and come out with a win, you're facing professional guys, so it's a scary thing going in there. But I think this was one of the first opponents where people were like, kind of saying like, oh, like this is gonna really stop Lucas's hype train. I was getting a lot of trolls on the internet kind of telling me that too, and like, even Charles kind of heard, not from, but he said, a lot of people he trusted in Massachusetts were telling him, this guy's really good. Like, like people he trusts, people from like, you know, uh, Rico DeShulo, like Kyle Boschniak, like Devin Powell, like really established great guys were like, this kid's way better than his record. He's like a really legit pro. And like, I knew that as well, from watching him. And I really guarded against a lot of his special tricks. Like he had a really good guillotine that I've seen and like some other things. And the other thing is he started training with the New England Cartel, which, he had like Tyson Chartier and, Mitch Raposo, like UFC fighter caliber corner, you know what I mean? So, there was a part of that where I was just very like, okay, like people kind of are expecting maybe me to lose this one and like, or, to not, and in my head, even, you never really know the level until you get there and try to accomplish it. So in my head, I was like preparing for a 3-round war as well. But at the end of it all, to actually be able to come out after all that and kind of come out with a win and do it in the fashion that I did it, like even I kind of felt surprised by that, and like I just really am, it impressed like my sort of, I was impressed by like the coaching staff and stuff as well, like just how well they prepared me, and it really it felt good to get that one because I mean, I'll be honest, in some ways it felt like I was going in there and people were trying to sort of expose me as this like fake New Englander or a fake undefeated fighter, and instead I came in there and, you know, got a submission in about 2 minutes with a super rare choke and like kind of, did the thing I did in all my other previous fights against a high level pro. So that felt really good.
Yeah, for sure. That submission was in great fashion, super rare submission. When you first went in there, I saw you hit him with some really good leg kicks that really affected him, in my opinion. Then you had him up in the cage, had a pretty solid takedown on him. Was that the game plan going in?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely wanted to work a lot of my calf kick stuff. Like I work, obviously I have all my coaches. Like Matt Waggy does a great job of like cage wrestling and that sort of thing. And you see Charles McCarthy with the finish, and obviously my brother Charles Rosa helps me a lot with all the conceptual stuff. But in terms of what you're talking about, like the leg kicks and stuff, yeah, I went in there and I knew the kid calf kicked, but a lot he spammed calf kicks. So I'd been working a lot on like draw checks and stuff, which is something that Roger Crawl uses at MMA Science. And so yeah, I worked a lot on like calf kicks and low kicks. I have pretty heavy legs, so they're kind of a weapon. Been trying to like tune into more. Because like every people like hold pads for me, they'll man, he kicks your kicks. So it's something that I really want to like develop. And yeah, so I kind of was going for calf kicks. When I look back in the video, I kind of hit them more like at this spot, like right under the knee, which is actually something I kind of worked on a little bit when I was in Canada and Nova Scotia, like as well. Like I was a little different than my normal training, but I did like a little bit of like Shotokan karate type stuff, and it just helped. This guy Ron Fagan, who really took me, and he like helped me for a couple days, kind of work on like placement of kicks, and obviously my other coaches really helped develop that stuff and that sort of game plan. But it was cool to sort of implement like I think that's part of what makes martial arts great is you go to all these other places, and if you can even get just one little detail that ends up helping you in a fight, like it's really cool to be able to do that, and that's sort of the whole point of martial arts is to learn. But yeah, think I hit him with one really hard, and I hit him with another one like by that knee, and I saw he kind of like started moving backwards a lot more after that, and yeah, I mean, I sometimes when I go in for takedowns, I just kind of go to sort of feel like what they have, and so I think the first takedown he sort of blocked, but I felt okay with that because I was still having a lot of forward pressure and like was doing a lot of oversteps and stuff like switch stances and like high elbow jabs and I felt good. A lot of people said that like my jabs worked really good after the fight and I hit a really strong two right before I took him down and that finishing sequence was basically because of it was like leg kick to high elbow jab to cross to like entry onto the cage, getting him down with like Matt Waggy's like single leg, and then like working into a north south position that I've been working a lot with Charles McCarthy and stuff. So everything like the transitions were all things that I worked. So to see it all materialize was really cool. And yeah, I mean my game plan, I thought the fight would go a little longer to be honest, like just because of um, you know, like the level of the guy I was fighting, and I think he is high level still. It just was like one of those things where I think I, you know, I came in there ready, So it was, and I implemented everything that I've been working on. So
And I feel like in all six of your fights, you've really adapted in every fight. Once you step in, you see how your opponent comes in, you see how your opponent moves, and you really adapt to their movements. I mean, this is six first round finishes in 10 months. When do you think you'll fight again?
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I'm always looking for new fights and stuff, and yeah, I mean, that's one of the things is like you go into the cage, it's like a puzzle you're working out, and like you figure out what works like very quickly. You try to at least, and then you figure out what doesn't. That's sort of what fight IQ is and if something keeps working, you keep doing it, and so that's why I'm throwing kicks and I'm doing forward pressure, and I felt he was doing an okay defending it, but I know he didn't throw his calf kicks very much going backwards. So like I'm kind of sort of trying to take away his offense while implementing mine. And so, if there's things you can like pick up early in the fight, you can sort of some of it's just a feel thing and you don't really know until you're in the octagon with that other person. I'll be honest, like when I was looking at Aaron Hughes, there was a lot on film that was like scaring me and I think he's a really, good fighter. But it was yeah, it was really special to be able to do what I did. But yeah, my next fight, and that's the thing, I always like, I always don't really take that much time to like enjoy each one because I'm always like, okay, well now my next goal is, like 7-0. So, um, yeah, I right now I've been kind of skill building and making some adjustments to things, but I'll be honest, I've been looking at these shows that are in April and May in Florida, and of course I want to fight again on Combat FC in June, but I probably will try to fight again before then. It's tough to know. At this point, it's tougher to like, get matchups and and sort of, you know, to get opponents to fight me is really hard at this point. They see what I've done to everyone, and even at people at like at each caliber, at each tier that I'm trying to move up to. So it's been a little bit difficult. This search has been a little bit more difficult, and I believe me, I'm exhausted with it. Like my coaches are pretty on it, but like I'm very very exhausted like with my search and my trying to make fights happen because it's what I love to do. So like I try to treat it like a job, and I'm part of that too. Is I'm trying to start to implement a little bit of newer stuff too, like I just started sort of paying attention to it more, but sort of more of the tangible stuff, like sort of the sports sciencey stuff. Like I'm gonna have my blood work done to sort of figure out like which nutritional deficiencies I have, and I've always been very like particular about my diets and that sort of thing. But I think to really take it to the next level, like, I'm someone who focuses a lot on the intangible, the non-measurables. Like in my mind, I'm always like, I always viewed it as like, I'm not like the most athletic or the most talented in that sense. And so I kind of focus on like mental toughness and like outthinking my opponents and like just consistency, which I think definitely is important and works as well. But I don't want to have to lose a fight to realize that those other things, like the tangibles or at least some of the athletic performance stuff, and the recovery stuff that I might neglect like matters really a lot. So I'm trying to, sort of implement some new things like health optimization stuff to try to like figure out my diet, my sleep patterns, and a lot of that has to do with like, tracking my meals and tracking my, like I got one of those Whoop things, and that's sort of tracking my like, heart variability rates and all these like recovery things, and they're basically gonna take a lot of this data and run it through like different like really advanced AI systems to figure out like some places where I can sort of optimize my training. And um that's something that I know I'm very resistant to because I'm like again more of a mental fighter in that sense. But at the end of the day, like I'm gonna try to do whatever it takes, like in terms of consistency, to win and make myself a better fighter. And I think like to be open minded to new ways of like improving yourself and doing it like in a good way, um, to ultimately inspire people is really, you know, important. So I, I'm working through a lot of like different things every day now. Like it seems like my coach Roger Carl always talks about the in betweens in fighting. Like in between each striking set, you want to be able to like use feints, use level changes, use like maybe like calf kicks and stuff to sort of like just feel your opponent. Like take those little in between moments where there aren't combos going and uh and create the action. And I feel like the in between moments in my life now, like between training sessions and between like when I'm doing like certain activities, is just filled right now with like a lot of things. Like I'm tracking things now. I'm trying to like get fights to happen. Obviously I'm always like trying to work with sponsors and that sort of thing. But yeah, so it just feels like right now there's a lot going on with that. But yeah, I'm trying really hard to get on some of these shows in April or May, and so that's my goal right now. But
You talked about how it is kind of hard to get an opponent to fight you. Do you feel like if you were to fight again, are you open to fighting at 145 and 155?
so no, I mean one of the things is like I took a lot of these early fights because it's not like you're ever fighting a pro fight for experience. Like pro fights is like you're at that level, so you have. It's not like at that point you're not like doing things like an amateur, like just doing things for the experience of it, or as a learning experience. Like your goal to go in there as a pro is like making sure you're winning every fight. But I'm more like resistant to fighting up weight classes, even though I did it a couple times, like earlier in my pro career. I mean, earlier is like only 6 months ago, but still, earlier in my pro career because it was like shorter notice fights and that sort of thing. But and I'm still open to fighting short notice fights. Like I can drop the weight, I feel, especially with some of the new diet stuff I'm implementing. But ultimately, um, ultimately, I want to get into the UFC and be known as a featherweight, or like get to the highest level of fighting and be known as a featherweight, like because that's the weight that I feel I perform the best at. So I don't want it to be like on Tapology that I'm some 155 or something. And there was a time where I was ranked as a lightweight like for a while, like longer than I was comfortable with, and I never fought as a lightweight as an amateur either. So obviously, I've gained a lot of muscle and that sort of thing from just like my training over the past 4 years. But featherweight's like where I feel like I perform at my optimal level, and it's a good weight class for me. I don't feel the cut like drains me too much. So yeah, it's one of those things where I would like to fight a featherweight.
While we're talking about being on a cut, personally, what is your favorite food while on a cut? Because being on a cut's hard. You can't wait for the fight. What is something you enjoy that's like, okay, I like this?
So yeah, I mean it's tough. Like I love food. People always talk to me like, "Oh, you man, you must like I could never do that. Like I like food too much." I'm like, "No, no, you don't understand. Like I don't have any vices. Like people might not know this about me, but like I've never in my life drank. I never in my life has smoked. I've never done any drugs. I've never even had a cup of coffee or an energy drink. I don't really play video games. Like food is something I love. And I come from an Italian Irish family where my dad's like cooking all the time. It's just, kind of part of like my family culture, Rosa Nation culture. And and to not be able to eat like some of the dishes that I'm best at making, like chicken parmesan and like and all these pasta dishes, like Italian food is not the thing you usually eat when you're on a diet, um so yeah, it's tough, for me, like, I do, I call it kale jail because, one of the foods that I sort of trick myself into eating or thinking is good is kale. I send Snapchats to all my like friends and some of my fans being like, "Oh, kale jail, like, I'm so excited to eat it." And they get back to me like gross. And and part of it's just a way to sort of keep myself amused like throughout the weight cut. It's not like easy, going through this stuff. So you have to try to do it with like at least a funny attitude, or at least like embracing the absurdity of it. And that's kind of what I try to do in life a lot, is like embrace the absurdity of all this stuff. um but yeah, so I'd say like, kale is something that I implement kind of like jokingly, but it is something that like, I use a lot in my diet. If you're talking about like while I'm on a cut, something that I'm really good at making and I know tastes really good is like, there's sort of this point like where I'd say like 2 weeks out where I can still eat like some of the fattier meat. Like I make really good chicken thighs. I use like a balsamic glaze on it, like cut up like, carrots and stuff on the bottom so that it all cooks evenly. Uh, yeah, and yeah, some of it's very simple, but like, I'm pretty good at making those sorts of dishes.
I love that.
Yeah, my brother every because he makes fun of me like every time he's like, "Oh, what'd you eat today?" And before I can even interject, he just goes, "Chicken thighs," and I'm like, "Yeah, chicken thighs, dude." Like, what I was eating.
That's
But
funny.
yeah, so it's funny.
Your brother is in the GFL now, so
Yeah, yeah,
that makes things a little interesting. So I'm obviously sure you're probably working with him with that as well. He
yeah.
should have a fight coming up, I'm pretty sure. Do you think you'll be in his corner during those fights?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, here's the thing. Like, he wants me in his fights a lot. So, like, whether I'm in his corner or like technically speaking or not, like, I'm always in his corner. Like, I'm helping him. Like his last fight, I flew to Mississippi with him, to help him. And yeah, I always try to be like, there for him because I know, I think he knows too. Like, I'm someone he can train with who keeps him safe, and I kind of try to do the same thing he does to me, which is take a more conceptual approach on everything and just like sometimes as a coach, you're so zoned into everything, like you sort of miss the bigger picture of like, well, wait, what does this guy do well, and like, what are we trying to avoid? You know what I mean? So when you get too caught up in your own like techniques and stuff, so I think we do a pretty good job with each other, like once of like especially dialing in, because one of the things I think me and Charles have that is a little different than a lot of people is we have this like very different like fight mentality. Like we win a lot through our mental toughness, like as well as our jujitsu and that sort of things. And like we go in there to kill, and like we go in there with a different sort of attitude. Like, and so because we can relate to each other so much on that level, it's like a sort of level of like almost like security feeling like when you have each other there. And so yeah, I mean, I think he's fighting in Vegas in May, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I mean that'll, or maybe it's LA. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I mean that's gonna be an awesome battle, and I'm sure I'll be there for it. And yeah, it's so cool to see like MMA starting to sort of, I mean not starting to, it's been doing this, but like to sort of explode the way it has. And I think you'll see more of these promotions, and because I think the thing that's cool about GFL too is just what it could potentially mean for fighters in terms of like um the opportunities it presents.
While staying on the topic of your brother, I don't think I've
Yeah.
seen you answer this question before. Have you been to like a lot of his UFC fights, like when he was in Boston and stuff? Were you there?
Oh yeah, no, so I mean it's funny, like you go back to all that stuff, is yeah, like before when I was not really when I was younger, like I wasn't in the MMA scene. I was doing my academic stuff and philosophy, or like even before that. So yeah, I've been to some of his fights. There was a couple I couldn't make it to. Like there was one in Japan he was supposed to have, and it actually got canceled, so I didn't get to go to that. But I never went to Japan because of that. I was like in school at the time. There's other ones. his first fight, I think in Stockholm, Sweden. I remember my first story actually of like ever was I was newly on the rugby team, and that week I had been named a starter. I think it was my freshman year of rugby. I had like a breakout game, and the next week they named me as like the main starter at flanker, and I eventually grew into being the 3-year captain in that position. So like I didn't even know what rugby was when I first started, but like I knew immediately, it's a tough sport and like I had the killer mentality. So week two, I'm literally like Francis. I remember had the phone and we were trying to watch the fight, and because of the time zone difference, like the game's about to start, and I literally was like just trying to watch as much of Charles's fight as I possibly could against Dennis Seaver before I remember literally they're like the ball's getting kicked, and I ran onto the field like after like from watching like his phone, and then ran onto the field like literally to go tackle someone. Like I literally made the first tackle of the game. So it was a pretty like interesting like obviously Charles got fight of the night for that, and Dennis Seaver fought like literally Conor McGregor next. So it's like to sort of he had a really like interesting start to his career and stuff too, and that was like a fight on 3 days notice and stuff. So I know it meant a lot to him to be able to perform like well enough in that to really like make his mark on the UFC and then have a long career in the UFC. So yeah, I mean, there's been some of those. There's been some of those. I remember I was in Mexico City with Yair Rodriguez. He fought Yair Rodriguez, like the UFC former UFC champion, but he fought him back when before he was the champion, obviously. And to be honest, it was a split decision in Mexico City against like Yair Rodriguez. I thought Charles won the fight. Like I'm pretty objective, like but I knew after the fight that he hadn't won just because I'm like, we're in Mexico City, like that was too close for them to give it to the guy that they're not gonna give it to. So, in my mind, like he won that, but I was the only one in my family like not celebrating after the fight ended because I was like, I know what's gonna happen here, because I had enough jujitsu or like MMA knowledge at the time, But I thought he won that. But it was funny, like I was in Mexico City and I was I'm blonde, like some of my other members of my family aren't, but I was like the whitest person, like the palest, like blonde kid. It was like always stuck out like a sore thumb. And luckily, the people around us actually treated us pretty well. But like Charles said, when he walked through the the walked into the cage, he was getting like beer cans and stuff thrown at him from down off the rafters. So yeah, it was like we've been in like those environments, like hostile environments in a way, but I've also I saw him when he won in the Boston Garden, like after coming back from his neck surgery. That was like one of the craziest things ever. I think actually I was supposed to be in his corner, but I got like I never get sick, but I got a really bad like flu that week. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be around him cutting weight with like with his immune system down, like while I'm sick. That's not good. And so he just wanted me in his corner, like as sort of a specialty thing, like having his brother in his corner was like gonna be a big deal. Like even though I didn't fight or really train like at that high level at that time, uh, I was still just in college, but he ended up using Rico DeSchulo, who ended up like helping him a lot. And so I'm kind of happy that I wasn't part of that. Things happen for a reason. Like I think he had a really tough fight against Bermudez, but he ended up like finishing him in the first round with an armbar, like crazy awesome fight. And so he won, I think, like submission of the night or something for that too. So I've been around for all this stuff, and it's tough. Like as I'd say, it's way tougher as a fan because you have no control over it, and like it's scary. Like you're trying to do it's almost scarier because like as a fighter, throughout the day, like a fight day, you're like, oh, in my mind when I'm in fight mode, the day of the fights, I feel like the universe has like conspired to make sure that I win. Like that's the point I get to, like in terms of, feeling ready. But when you're just a fan, you don't feel that. Or you're just a like supporter, you don't feel that. You just feel like the tension of it all. And and I remember even one day on that day, actually, I remember I listened to sports radio a lot to sort of decompress. And I remember literally listening to sports radio in bed, like trying to calm down because I'm like, oh, Charles is gonna fight today. And I was listening to Felger and Maz, and someone calls in talking about the Boston fights and like, oh, Manny Bermudez is fighting Boston Strong Charles Rosa. That's going to be a cool local matchup. And I'm like, gosh, I can't escape this. Like, so it's a very scary thing sometimes. Like, because he's my brother. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I've been to a lot of his fights, and it's they're crazy, and it's crazy because again, it's one of those times where you see like pretty much everyone you've known like from your childhood, and it's even crazier when it's the TD Garden. You're like, I remember walking by people, and one of the coolest sweatshirts I have, it's like a Rosa Nation sweatshirt with just someone, one of my my brother's friends had like made these, like hoodies, and they're like, "Hey, you want one of these?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I was just walking by someone in the TD Garden, and he gave it to me, and it's just, I don't know, it's just like such a crazy atmosphere.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Do you feel like your brother has really like built you into the knowledge of MMA and how it works and all these sequences that happen?
yeah, yeah. My brother, he's a super big help in terms of like, especially like the concept of stuff and like the fighter mentality and like, especially stuff early on. I think like I try to pick up knowledge from everyone and try to like, like what is like the things, because like he's basically giving me a blueprint, and he always tells me, he's like, our goal is to improve on the blueprint. So like one of the things I do is I try to take like what everyone I see like around me, and I try to like take the best pieces of all of that. And so I see the things that work for Charles like in his body type, and I try to really implement those. And I'm like, oh man, he has a great front headlock. Like, why is my front headlock not working? And I started working it more, and like I would look at his grips, and like that was one of the biggest steals for me about like front headlock, was figuring out like S grips versus when to use this kind of grip, and like a gable grip obviously. And so and that's kind of how I finish a lot of my fights, is that kind of stuff. So I mean, it helps to have those people too that like are, I think one of the things that's good with Charles is he cares. He wants me to become a world champion, and to have people in your corner like that that like not only believe in you but want it to happen is really good. But yeah, and there's certain ways too. Like he doesn't like, I think, overdo it either. Like he lets me learn some things on my own. Like I've figured out a lot of things that I've developed a lot of skills in terms of like sponsorships, and like even figuring out some of my matchmaking stuff that is that's things that like I think he knows like the level of intelligence that I have. So he I there's certain things I'm able to do on my own as well, that like, if I need him, or if I need, Charles McCarthy, or like Coach Waggy, or if I need advice from many of these people who have like, been through it, I can always call on them. And that's like a valuable thing to have, because not everyone has that, especially at the level of closeness that I have it.
100%.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's fighting soon. We gotta hope you're fighting soon, as long as
Yeah,
someone
we gotta hope. Yeah, we'll see. We'll
late,
see.
right?
It was tough. You told me this interview was happening. I'm like, I think I'll have an opponent by then, because I had a couple of like hooks, and then things disappear. People like, oh no, I can't get my passport. I can't get this, so it's tough. But yeah, I wanted to be able to announce that I had a fight on here, but it just hasn't materialized yet. So we'll see. It's tough.
We gotta hope someone steps up to the plate and takes it.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
But thank you for joining the show again. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. Of course. Yeah. It's always great and yeah, it was cool to even have I think you were around for you saw like in person the carnage at at my
Yeah,
last fight. So that was cool to see,
yeah.
so
So
yeah.
thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys check out Lucas Rosa. We're gonna have a documentary coming out on his last fight versus Aaron Hughes, and make sure you stay tuned for his next fight, which will probably be posted on your Instagram when it comes out. Right?
Yeah, pretty soon. Yeah, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.
Thank you guys.